Okay, we are live. I'm really grateful to have Greg Everett with me on the Constantly Consistent podcast. And we're going to interview Greg, talk about weightlifting, some of his background, and just pick his brain. Greg doesn't need an introduction, but I'll give him an introduction anyway for those of you that don't know. He's a world championship level coach in Olympic weightlifting, has coached Olympians, is a best selling author of if you're a coach, you have this book. Obviously, I have it on standby, right? The Olympic Weightlifting Bible. And he's also authored this book called Tough as well. And Greg's also an all around great dude and just given some of his time to join us on the podcast. So, Greg, thank you for joining and welcome to the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, before we start, I want people to know that you're, and whether you know this or not, you're not as intimidating as you may seem on social media or on Instagram. I remember coming to camp and I was a little bit more intimidated, and I was like, oh, Greg's such a nice guy. He's so down to earth. Do people know that about you?
Well, once they meet me, they do. But yeah, I don't know why I have that reputation, because I don't feel like I come across that way. Certainly not anything I'm doing intentionally, but I have heard that many times before. Like, I was joking at camp, Amy's the mean one, I'm the nice one.
Right, right, yeah. So just so you all know, Greg is the man, and you got to get out there to meet him. So, Greg, let's jump right into it. I want to be mindful of your time. So I'm curious, and I'm sure listeners are going to be curious. How did you get into weightlifting first as an athlete, and then how did that evolve into your coaching craft?
It's kind of a really underwhelming story. So I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. Of course, this was back in the olden days, pre-internet. So it was very hard to find information on obscure things like Olympic weightlifting at that time, and nobody was really doing it. I'm not 100% sure, but my best recollection is that my first exposure, and this could be wrong because I mix up these dates a lot. My first exposure to weightlifting was in Charles Poliquin's book. He had, I think it was a photo of one of the Air Force weightlifting teams, doing a clean or something like that. That's my first memory of recognizing what it was. And again, I could be wrong about that. And so that's what I remember getting my interest initially. And then I had to kind of search things out because, again, you couldn't just Google, what is weightlifting? And of course, years later, I found out that Jim Schmitz was 45 minutes north of me. And is like one of the most decorated weightlifting coaches in America. But I had no reason to pick up a phone book from South San Francisco in 1995. But so I was self-taught, did a little bit throughout, in high school, but I didn't really have access to a proper gym or anything like that. So it kind of snatch, clean, and jerk was sort of just like deadlift, back squat, bench press. I didn't really know better. I didn't understand the sport. And when I met Rob Wolf years later, we opened a CrossFit gym together. Well, technically he had opened it. He asked me to partner there shortly after. And now I finally had access to a little space with rubber floor, some really cheap high temp bumper plates, and a bar that kind of spun a little bit. So I was able to kind of pick up again as an athlete. And so I trained that, and I kind of naturally gravitated towards the coaching side of things, and people were coming to me asking for help. And so it was a very natural thing to do. And I kept competing as a lifter while I was coaching, professionally. I say at that time it was very hard to make money. I was doing a lot of other stuff also, but I did them simultaneously for a number of years until I, officially retired, I guess, in 2016. As a lifter, just because of a bad shoulder injury at the 2015 Nationals.
Yeah. And then, so from there, I think that's a perfect segue. When you moved into coaching, like, were you more like gravitating towards that because of the injury, or was that something that you wanted to do anyway and you were just kind of on your way out and done with the sport?
It was an interesting process. It was very organic, and it's not something I necessarily set out to do initially. It was like people were coming to me asking for help. I was providing them help. It seemed to me like I was able to do a fairly good job helping them, and I enjoyed it. I'd always gravitated towards training, coaching, teaching, that sort of thing. And so things kind of just fell into place as they worked out. And then the injury didn't really change the trajectory because I had already been committed. At that point, I already owned a gym. Amy and I had started Catalyst Athletics. We were in the San Francisco Bay Area with a nice big gym. And so at that point, it was more like, okay, now it's time to really transition fully into coaching, and my athletic career, at least in this sport, needs to be done. Like and so I was always prioritizing my coaching at that point, because once you take on an athlete as a coach, like that, you're not a very good coach if you are prioritizing yourself as an athlete over the people you coach.
Hmm.
So it was a natural transition, although I can't say I wasn't bitter about it, because I didn't feel ready mentally to move on.
Hmm.
I was still improving, even though I was super old. But it was like, speaking of Rob Wolf, he used to always use the analogy. It's like, you're cruising along in a little Cessna, everything's going great, and all of a sudden you're exploding into the side of a mountain. That's basically what my weightlifting career was like. Everything was great, and then it was really bad all of a sudden. So it was fine. It was the best thing I could do to remain in the sport, doing something I enjoyed doing without actually being, a weightlifter in the truest sense anymore.
Gotcha. So that's great. So, and then as you got into coaching, I'm sure it was different, then as it is now. I'm assuming the online scene wasn't as prevalent as it is now. And but I don't know if it's a broad question, but advice or tips, even someone for like myself who's I would say like a developing coach, how to, I guess, really stand out, because I would say the market's very saturated. Instagram, as you and I talked about at your camp, there's so many influencers. People are like, check out this latest movement, and we can keep it towards weightlifting because that's where your primary coaching is. But yeah, so any advice on that, on how to stand out and last in the coaching industry?
Yeah. But I will preface it by saying, I attribute so much of my success to really being in the right place at the right time and happening to have a bunch of seemingly unrelated skills that all kind of came together and worked in a way to put me where I am. And what I mean by that is, when I started doing this stuff, the Olympic weightlifting scene was so small in the US. There was nothing online at that time. I mean, USA Weightlifting's website did not even have a single video of a snatch or clean and jerk. Like, if you wanted to learn how to snatch and clean and jerk, you could not even do it online through USA Weightlifting. You would have to go to a certification, which, what 15-year-old kid with no money who just wants to learn how to lift is going to go spend 500, $700 or whatever it was at that time for a 2-day coaching certification just to learn how to lift? It makes no sense.
Yeah.
So I didn't really have any competition. So that was a really big help for me, as I got out front of it so early. And I was able to pump out so much content in that time that, I don't think at least any one person will ever catch up to me at this point. So take my advice with a grain of salt, because I had a big
Yeah, sure.
advantage in that sense, right?
Yeah.
But the way I look at it, and the way I continue to approach my business, which is as close to a business plan as I've ever gotten, is that long-term success, which to me is what you should be looking at anyway, comes down to authenticity, being genuinely invested in the people you're trying to help. And those two things are what's going to create a reputation for you that lasts, right? So you can approach the business in the quick sort of like, how do I make as much money as possible as quickly as possible, have my Instagram blow up and have 1 million followers, and get supplement deals and all this stuff. And you can do that by really taking advantage of the marketing side of things, of spending your time learning how Instagram works and how YouTube works and how you can maximize views and engagement and all this stuff. And very little of that has anything to do with the quality of your content in terms of how it relates to helping people get better at weightlifting, or whatever fitness related thing you're doing. It has to do with being good at social media, right? Now, can you do both? Yes, to some degree, but you do have to prioritize one over the other. So the way I think of it is, there's a market first approach and there's a content first approach. So the market first approach is the classic sales kind of thing: is you look at the existing market, you look at all the metrics, you look at all the data, and you say, what's missing here? How do I fill this gap? What are the methods that are going to make me stand out and bring in the most money? And where's my funnel and all this kind of stuff like that? And you can get pretty successful like that. But typically it's going to be short-lived, because you're going to be tapping into fashion and trends. I mean, the word trend is literally used
Trending.
on
Yeah.
social media as a way to like improve views and engagement. But think about what that means. It means it is temporary. And so you are constantly searching for the next thing and changing what you're doing in the format and all this stuff. Whereas the content first approach is, how do I produce something that is valuable to people, like fundamentally? Not because like I saw it because it has the same song as 8 trillion other videos and this and that, and it's kind of interesting and maybe it'll work, and oh, this guy's graphics are super awesome and he looks super good without a shirt, and all these like flashy things that attract people, those don't last. So if with the content first approach, if you are always, again, you are authentically being who you are, hopefully you're somewhat of a cool person and people like you,
Right.
right? If you're a terrible person, don't be authentic. Pretend
Yeah.
you're cooler. But it's genuinely valuable stuff that holds up over time. It holds up to scrutiny. It holds up through trends and changes in fashion and approaches and all these different things. Some of my most popular videos are some of the oldest ones. The graphics are terrible. I'm talking too fast because I had to make them 1 minute at max because Instagram at the time, it was 1 minute. Period. That was your only option.
Hmm.
And I didn't have time to make one Instagram video and one YouTube video completely differently. So that's my best advice is figure out who your audience is, figure out what you want to provide them, and then figure out, based on who you are and your experience and your capabilities, how you can make that stuff best, right? How do you stand out by doing it as well as you can possibly do, and what is it that you are able to do that's different or better than other people on average? And really make sure that your interest in other people's success always comes through, rather than it being very clear, as you can see, or at least I can see with so many people, that it is not about that at all. It is about, hey, you guys, look at me. Look at what I'm achieving. Look at how successful I am because you suckers, bought into all this, my algorithmic magic, or whatever it is.
Sure.
It's more like, hey, in 10 years, 15 years, are people going to be able to look back and say, man, this guy, this gal's, they're doing the same thing they've always done, which is just doing their best to provide something that helps me.
Yeah, I would say, and for those that are listening that I'm sure follow you or fans of you, or even from my audience, like Greg's or Catalyst Athletics video is the gold standard that we use. And I know a lot of coaches use, and that's kind of something where it's like just you obviously walking the walk, talking the talk, like your product, we know it's going to be a good video. We know it's going to be instructional. We know it's going to have value, and we know it's around coaches or lifters. And that's something where and it's almost, I don't know if it's daily or weekly, but something that you can rely on. So I think, yeah, there's a ton of value in that. And this reminded me of, have you ever read the book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance?
Yeah, many years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So they talk about, the author talks about this. The whole point of the book, right, is quality, and what is quality for those listening. It's not about Zen, but
Right.
yeah, it's about quality, and the whole premise of the book is doing things that are meaningful and that have quality versus, exactly to your point, trendy, catchy, the latest, bells and whistles, versus get really rooted deeply in offering quality service and be a quality person as well, which is a deep philosophical thing we can get into. But
Yeah.
and that will come through. So I think that's great to see the similarities there between that.
Well, and one more quick thing to add to that just came to mind is that I think something I had to do, which was very difficult, it's still difficult for me sometimes, is that taking that approach, you have to kind of accept the idea that you're probably never going to be the absolute best in terms of traditional metrics, right? I'm never going to have the biggest Instagram following. I'm never going to have the best engagement. I'm never going to be making bank on YouTube videos because of the way I approach it, right? But I'm going to outlast the vast majority of people. So you look at, what's the classic, sales metric is like lifetime value of a client or something like that, right? Like how much money do you make per person over the course of a lifetime? You can look at it more like that versus like how many different people can I get to give me $5, is how many different people are sticking around long term because they're continuing to get that same value. They still like what you're doing. It's still helpful to them.
Hmm.
So I think, yeah, but what comes with that is not being the absolute superstar social media influencer, right? You're not going to be that guy with 4 million followers maybe you don't even have the blue check, which is actually a white check on a blue background, but you know
Yeah,
what I
the
mean.
blue check. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's again, what's your priority? Figure that out, stay focused on that, and you're going to get more success out of that in a way that gets you to where you want to go. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I didn't sleep much last night, so that's why I'm struggling here.
No, you're good.
What I'm trying to say is if you want to just get rich and you want to be famous, that is a completely different goal than to be very good at what you do, right?
Hmm.
They can coincide at least for part of that journey, but they're not the same thing. And as soon as you recognize that and accept that, it's going to be much easier for you to actually pursue what you need to do to get you where you want.
Yeah. I mean, that's a perfect segue because I wanted to talk to you about your camps or ask you about your camps next. I visited Greg and Amy at their camp, or at their home, the Catalyst camp in Oregon about a little more than a week
A
ago.
couple weeks ago,
And I
yeah.
think exactly to your point, like that was something that yeah. Well, let me take a step back. You're putting out there certain things, like you said. You're not trying to be famous on Instagram. You're not trying to, talk to everyone. You're trying to have that lifetime or that long term value. I've been following you for a long time. My mentors have been following you for a long time, et cetera, et cetera. So when the opportunity to come to the week long camp presented itself, I mean, I jumped on it immediately, and thank gosh I did because it sold out in like less than 24 hours. But it was a no-brainer, and the price wasn't even like, I mean, of course, right? But I was like, okay, whatever it is, like I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna travel across the country. I mean, it took me like 10 hours, but it was extremely worth it. But to that point of you're talking to a very specific audience. Not everyone's gonna do that, and I don't think you want you want the people that want to be there, that want to learn, that are nice or kind, not nice, that are kind, caring people,
They're
keep
pretty nice. Yeah.
kind, caring people, uplifting, supporting. So you're targeting that through your content, which I think that brings its own type of people. And Amy, to her, her credit too, that's what she puts out on Instagram. So with that being said, the camp brought a very specific, in my opinion, type of person. That was my first camp. I can't wait for the next one. You should definitely go. Who's ever listening to this, if you can. And to your point, you had multiple return campers, like once, twice, some people four times. I think that just is another kind of example of what you just said of like what you're trying to create with these long term value. Speaking of the camp, how long or yeah, how long have you and Amy have been doing them, hosting them? I know this last one was the first week long, and
Yeah.
what is your guys' like intention behind it? I'm super curious.
I can't remember what year the first one was. It might have been 2020. So it hasn't been a terribly long time, but I mean, that's 5 years ish. So I mean, for years, I traveled all around doing seminars, weekend seminars. And, the first few years, I really liked doing it because it was similar to the camps where you get to interact with people. You get to have like the great experience of seeing people learn and have these breakthroughs and really enjoy themselves. And as a coach, you learn because you have to find new ways to explain things, or you figure out new drills because what you were trying to do isn't working, all these things. So it's reps, right? It's just
Hmm.
exposure and practice. But I got so burnt out from traveling that I just, like, at one point I just stopped and I didn't do any for a couple years, and I still don't really do them. I'll do like one a year maybe if someone is like really adamant and they can, convince me to come out.
Good to know.
Yeah, but the camps are like the best of all of it because I don't have to travel.
Hmm.
So right there, that means I don't have to have as many people, to make it make financial sense. I can have a
Yeah.
smaller group, which is more quality instruction, better experience for those people.
Hmm.
Because I'm not paying for flight, I'm not paying for hotel, all these things.
Sure.
$40 hamburgers and whatever. The people get to experience the Catalyst gym, which I think is a huge draw. I mean, it's very common for people to walk in and they're like, eyes wide, and they're taking pictures and videos
I
and like,
was,
oh my
yeah.
God. Yeah, it's really normal. And so, I get that question like, oh, are you ever going to host a camp, in Europe or over here? No, I might do seminars there, but it's not like the part of the camp experience to me is being there in the
For sure.
Catalyst gym. And I think the camps, as I recall, were Amy's idea. And of course I was like, dude, there's no way people are going to pay that much money. This is ridiculous. People aren't going to travel to this little town. It's such a hassle. And I'm very pessimistic. I just never believe people are going to give me money for stuff.
Sure.
And so, the first one, I think we had 15 people, which is what we aimed for, and they've just been chugging along since. I don't think we've ever had one that hasn't sold out to this date. In
Incredible.
any case, to your point about the people who come, it is a very self-selecting group. So I started Catalyst in 2006, so we're coming up on 20 years now
Wow.
that I have been kind of cultivating this reputation and this culture. And, people have had that time to figure out who I am, who Amy is, what we want to do and who we are, and, the kind of stuff we're putting out there. And I think the great thing about that is you don't get people who don't like you, right? So it's like,
Yeah, they're not gonna
you
come.
look at it as like, oh, everyone at camp who shows up, they love us. We must be amazing. But really it's just that all the people who don't like us don't come, right? And the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
thing is they don't like me, so they don't follow me on Instagram, right? There's a lot more people out there who don't know me or don't like me than who do like me, but it's like this little like insular community where it's like, oh yeah, Greg and Amy are great.
Yeah, they're the best.
So that's an enjoyable part of camp is everybody likes us.
Yeah.
And I think that's another big part of the camps why they're so much more enjoyable now for me than seminars, aside from not having to travel. It's because of the higher price, because there's probably more travel involved. It is even more self-selecting than a seminar. So seminars, my seminars generally were very good groups, but you could guarantee there were going to be at least a couple people who you felt like really weren't enjoying it, or like they just weren't having a great time. And that always bummed me out, because then you focus on them instead of the 95% of the people who are having a good time. And
Always.
so, even just
Always.
for me personally, it's a better experience and we have fun.
Yeah.
The week-long camp, I was nervous. Like, man, if we get a bad group, this is going to be a long week.
Yeah. And they're at your
And
house.
everybody was so awesome. And the best part, like you said, everybody gets along. Like, I think it was interesting to me because I think this camp was the fastest that community formed, right? It's usually pretty quick, but like I felt like this time it was instantaneous. Like everybody was buddies, everybody was, talkative and friendly and supportive. And so that just makes it so much more enjoyable for everybody there, but also for Amy and me. So we're not coming in during the breaks to go work and just like, I hate my life. These people are miserable. I don't remember what the question was. So maybe
No,
I
that
answered it,
was
maybe not.
yeah. That was great. That was great. I would say, kudos to you and Amy. I always believe it starts from the top down, right? So you guys cultivate that environment where, we felt welcome, and, like you said, it could be intimidating. Yes, your gym is, I snuck the pictures for Instagram and everyone was like, "Oh my God, you're at the Mecca." I was like, "I know." So exactly to your point. But yeah, you hit the question was like why you do the camps and how long you doing it. So yeah, so thank you for that. So what I learned and what I really took away from camp, besides like personally, as like an athlete, from a coach, so much about coaching Olympic weightlifting. So like, my background is in, I would say, general fitness. Yes, CrossFit. So that's where I learned. I never trained in an Olympic weightlifting gym. I've never had an Olympic weightlifting coach. So your camp was the first time I was like a full on weightlifter, and I loved it.
Yeah.
So my question would be, and I think you had mentioned this when you and I were having dinner one night, most of the people you work with are what classified as general population clients or people, meaning for those listening, they like Olympic weightlifting, they do it because it's fun and adds value to their life, but they're not trying to go to the Olympics or compete at the highest levels. I'm really interested in your take on teaching Olympic lifting to, I don't, maybe not the masses, because I don't think you're just, I know what we just spoke about, you don't want the masses, but to the general population person that is starting at 30 or at 40. Like, I have a handful of clients who start, one's in their 40s, one's in their 30s, and I love it. I think it's so much fun, and I'm like, yes, we're gonna clean and we're gonna snatch. But yeah, like things you've learned, and I guess advice for coaching and teaching Olympic lifts for the general population person.
Yeah, I mean, it's numerically speaking, the vast majority of the coaching I do is normal people, right? It's not world championship level athletes. I have 10 to 15 of them at any given time, right? And then through the online groups I'm doing, I have, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds every month with turnover. So I don't know how many tens of thousands it's been at this point after this many years. So I think that the key difference between those two demographics is the elite lifter. They have these really lofty goals, and in order to achieve them, it requires a great deal of extremely hard work that is often very unpleasant.
Hmm.
Right? It's not something, it's my joke is, which is not really a joke, it's pretty serious, is you only have to enjoy the sport slightly more on average than you don't enjoy it, right? You don't have to
Yeah.
love it. It just has to have that like slight net positive balance, because that's a lot of times how it feels, right? Is you have a goal and you're like, God, this is awful, but this is what I want, so I'm going to keep doing it. The general population who comes to you in their 30s, 40s, hey, I want to do this to have fun, or I want to do this to help my other sport, or to support doing CrossFit better, whatever it is,
Hmm.
you cannot coach them like you coach someone who is trying to make a world championship team or medal at a continental championships or whatever the case is, because that is going to make their experience miserable. And the
Uh-huh.
whole point for them is to enjoy it, right? It is for the pleasure of it, it is for the benefit of it. And so you have to really change. And it's not like I'm some, militaristic, really gnarly coach with my other athletes. I'm pretty laid back with them too, but it's to a greater degree with that general population. You have to go out of your way to help them enjoy it. So
Hmm.
you have to help them learn stuff in a way that is not, it's really overwhelmingly positive reinforcement. It is always pointing out the positive. So, it's the classic, like, well, for every one thing you critique, you need to be doing at least one thing, telling them one thing they're doing well. And because no one, I don't care how good of an athlete you are, how dedicated you are, no one wants to hear nothing but negative over and over. This is what you did wrong. This is what you did wrong. This is what you did wrong. That wears on anybody. I don't care how tough you are.
Hmm.
The pat on the back here and there goes a really long way for any athlete. But so finding ways that you can help people get better, encourage them to continue wanting to get better,
Hmm.
help them enjoy the process while also actually helping them get better, right? So not taking the positivity so far that you never tell them anything they're doing wrong,
Right.
like, oh,
Sure.
that was the best snatch
Yeah.
ever, and
Yeah.
in reality it was just absolutely a car
Terrible. Yeah.
crash.
It's not good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like you got to help them get better somehow. You can't just
Yeah.
pretend that it's all great. But how do you do that, right? How do you say, God, that was actually probably the worst snatch I've ever seen anyone doing. I don't know how you've survived your life to this point. How do you help them when they're at that level, but like they enjoy it and they want to
Yes.
say,
Yes.
thanks, this is great. And it's not that hard. I've discovered, like, if you're just not, constitutionally, you're not a dick, like, it's not that hard to figure out, hey man, I can see that you are really working hard on this. It's definitely getting better. You don't say it's only getting, a fraction of a percent better,
Yeah.
but it's
Sure.
definitely getting
Sure.
better, whatever it is. Like, and it's true, like, you're not lying. You're just taking the time to actually pay attention and monitor their progress and give them that continued support, so that when you're telling them what they're doing wrong or what they need to correct, it's not this like soul crushing slap down from the coach who's just this mean person who hates them and is mad that they're not more athletic or whatever. It's like,
Right.
I love coaching people like that. It's fun, because you see, you'll have this like high level athlete and they make this great PR and they're like, yeah, but I feel like I should be doing this better. You're like, yeah, God forbid you enjoy this PR for 1 minute first. But then someone else, they'll make a half kilo PR and it's the ugliest thing you've ever seen, but it's a lift and they are ecstatic. And it's
Yeah.
like, how can you as a coach not share in that joy? Like, you just have to
Hmm.
be a bad person to not like enjoy that with them. So to me, that's both things are equally rewarding, but in different ways.
Yeah, and to give you credit, and we were talking about you guys at camp, not in a bad way, but we
Yeah.
were all super impressed. Maybe no, just kidding. Like how you and Amy were both able to deliver critiques and meaningful critiques for all of us, no matter what level, but keep it light, but also be sincere. And I remember one day I was working on my jerks and you were helping me with that. And you were like, I said better, not good. And like, I know
Yeah.
you were joking, but it was such a great coaching comment because I was like, he's right. It's not where it needs to be. It still needs to move in that direction, but it was better. And I was like, you know what? I'll take it. So
Well,
that,
and for me, the easiest thing is humor, right? The trick is figuring out what the audience's sense of humor is like how much does it align with your own, because you got to be careful. Sometimes you'll say something and you instantly recognize like, I shouldn't have said that quite that way. Like maybe this person doesn't know me well. Like we don't have that rapport yet for them to really trust that I'm joking and I'm not like actually insulting them.
right,
And so
right.
I've definitely made that mistake more than once over the years, but I've gotten better at it. And I think though that's again part of the self-selection process at the camp and Instagram is people know who we are well enough, and we have enough of a chance to establish some degree of rapport, and they get a chance to see who we are, so that when we make jokes like that, they're not like, God, what's his problem? They're like, oh yeah, that is kind of funny and also is helpful and makes sense. You know what I mean? But it's
Yeah.
like if I'm gonna have a job and I'm gonna go through all the stress of working for myself and not having a pension, or having to pay for my own health care, I need to at least be able to have fun like the majority of the time, right? And so like if I can't make jokes at my own trainee camps in my own garage, then what a waste of time that would be.
And I think for the lifter as well, which is this is a great segue into the next thing I want to talk to you about, but like coming from it from that levity. And there's a saying, it's like, take your work seriously but yourself lightly, along those lines. And whether take your workout seriously but yourself lightly, whatever. It's not like you're just snatching. You said this. You're just clean and jerking, right? You're just cleaning, and we're not doing. This is, I'm not direct quoting you, but
Yeah.
paraphrasing what you said. Right, we're not curing cancer. We're not doing brain surgery. We're not flying to outer space. We're just lifting some iron. And I know that sounds so silly, but myself included, because I compete, it can get so serious, right? And like I want to be stronger and faster and yada 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 yada. Like you said, like your top level competitors. Oh, I did this wrong. Like I can default to that versus like, whoa, I just lifted, like 120 kilos. That's awesome. Like keeping that levity and perspective as an athlete, lifter, general population, whoever you are, also helps, because I find also in the learning process as a coach and as a teacher, students learn better when there's that lightness. Not all, but most do. So that's really helpful to remember for myself. So thank you. Is like, yeah, keep it fun. Keep it like lifting is fun. It's a ton of fun, right? We're picking something off the ground and we're throwing it overhead. So it's like have some fun with it. You're not, yeah. So that's a great thing. And on that note, what I want to talk to you now is about the mindset. So, as an extension of that conversation, on one of the last days of camp, maybe it was the fifth or sixth day, I don't remember. Amy and Amy asked us if we had questions, and I forgot who it was, but somebody had asked about mindset, and in particular, how to approach heavy lifts, how to approach the sport in general. So, I mean, we can go a couple different ways here, and I know we have the stickers you gave us, the Garage Mind, which is a mindset to have, but I think that's something you also do such an amazing job of, is knowing your mindset, or at least the mindset you want to cultivate for yourself, and by extension your clients, and by extension out into the world. But yeah, like we'll get start there. Like, where does that inspiration come from to cultivate that mindset? That you wrote a book about it, right? Like the Tough Evaluation Journal. You're coaching your camp attendees about having this positive mindset. How did you establish that in yourself?
45 years or so of like struggling to not be entirely negative all the time was a big part of it. Uh, but yeah, I think finding that, um, it's really interesting because you can look at it two ways. It's like, what experiences do we as people tend to remember best? The negative ones, like the worst times of your life. That's what sticks in your brain forever. So you could look at that and go, well, I just need more negative reinforcement. I need to have more horribly traumatic experiences in the gym with my coach, and then I'll really get good at snatching. But of course, that's nonsense, because even if that did sort of work, you're miserable at the end of it
Yeah.
anyway. So what's the point of that? You're like, oh, I'm a world champion and I have horrible PTSD now for the rest of my life. So it does not seem like a winning interesting formula to me. And I think that for me, the reason I started getting so in depth with that stuff is because it seemed like there were two ends of the spectrum and somehow the middle was completely empty, right? So there's like the super negative critical approach, and then there's the ridiculously like inauthentically positive approach where it's just
Sure.
like, no, everything is good.
Hmm.
Well, no, it's not. Lots of things are terrible, and you need to be able to acknowledge that so you can address it and make them good, right? So it was kind of like, how do we, fill out that middle ground there so that we can be objective, be critical, but approach that in a way that is positive in the sense that we are looking for things that we are going to do rather than not do. We are always recognizing the things that we have done well rather
Hmm.
than only focusing on the things that are a problem. It's more of that kind of approach to positivity, a very practical approach to it and a more productive approach rather than just like, let's pretend everything is okay so I don't feel bad about myself. You know what the best way to not feel bad about yourself is to make the things about yourself that bother you better, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like it's just a social media thing now, like self-love and all this stuff. Yeah, I'm all for self-love.
Hmm.
My problem is the mischaracterization of self-love as like unconditional acceptance of how things are now, right? So it's like people misinterpret or misunderstand the idea of loving yourself as just saying, this is me, everything is perfect, I don't need to change anything, I just need to accept myself. And I kind of find that to be nonsense because you could
Sure.
have so many issues in your life that are making you unhappy, miserable, and just pretending that they're okay is not really going to change that. Like you are lying to yourself. And so short term,
Hmm.
maybe you can trick yourself, but long term, it's going to get worse and worse and worse.
Right.
And so obviously this applies to sport, it applies to fitness, it applies to life generally, but it's like, why not accept, like you do have to accept this is reality right now.
Hmm.
But why can't you say, this is what I would like reality to be? Now, how do I figure out the practical steps to go from here to here? And how do I do that in a way that is not torturing myself or it's just like this horrible self-flagellation where you're like, I'm a horrible person, I
Beat yourself up. Yeah.
I don't like myself, so I'm going to change myself. It's like, no, I do like myself, and that's why I'm going to help make myself into who I want to be. The best analogy I came up with when I was writing that book is, look at a parent with a child, right? Parents, most of them, love their kids more than anything on earth, right? They would do anything for them. All they want is for that kid to succeed. So let's say your kid is flunking out of high school. Do you just go, well, I accept him because I love him? No, you intervene and you say, we are going to make changes because I want you to be successful in this endeavor so that you can have a great life and be happy. Now, you're not doing that because you don't like your kid because he's failing out of school. You do it for the exact opposite reason, because you love your kid and you want the best for them. And it's odd to me that that exact same logic doesn't get applied by people to themselves, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just going to
No,
trail off
great.
on
I
that
was like,
one.
great, great. No, great point. I mean, as you said that, like the idea, the light bulb went off in my head. This self-love, there's a saying or a quote. Clearly, I like to quote and say things, but it's like self-discipline is one of the highest forms of self-love.
Right.
And it's along those lines. It's like, well, yeah, you could not be disciplined and go to bed when you want and eat what you want and drink what you want and not work out because you're like, I love myself. Sure, we won't go down that rabbit hole. On the opposite end, like you said, like if you want to take care of yourself and then by extension other people, well, you have to discipline yourself to get good sleep and eat nutritious food and drink water and all these things that go along with it. And to your point, that it's like an idea of you're shifting from like like Pollyanna, like blind acceptance, like, oh, everything is great, and it's like, no, don't be silly, but also careful on the other side where it's like, this is meaningless, I shouldn't even try, like a nihilistic
Right.
view. So I like that because I think it goes along with training, and to our audiences, it's like you get stronger or more mobile or better at weightlifting through training, and we can cultivate a better mind, not perfect, but a better mindset through training, and that can look like reading, talking to people like yourself, right? Expanding your viewpoint, going to therapy. I'm a big proponent of therapy. Yeah, like all these tools, journaling, to cultivate these traits that we want, which is perfect. So on that note, my next question for you would be: I want to start journaling. For those listening, Greg does his Ask Me Anything on Instagram, and one of the things I saw, which I screenshotted because it was so good, about your daily habits, and the two things that stuck out. I'm just looking at it here.
Yeah.
Were journaling
Good, because I don't remember.
yeah, yeah. So like journaling and reading, those are like two of the biggest things, and gratitude that stuck out to me. So I luckily, fortunately read, so I have that habit covered. But journaling is something I used to do. I don't do it anymore. I would love to get back into it. I'm asking you right now, Greg, like what's some advice that you could give me and our listeners to get and develop that habit of journaling?
I think it's pretty easy and straightforward. You have to have some kind of structure to rely on, right? Just saying, I'm going to journal every day. Well,
It's
like
not going
about
to happen.
what? What are you going to write about? Dear diary, Todd finally looked at me in class today. I'm so excited. Oh, okay, that's fine if you want to do that. That's fun. But to me, over the years, I would do it for a while and then stop for a while for that reason, because I didn't have a reliable structure that I felt was absolute or actually providing me consistent value. And so I kind of just refined it over time to 3 prompts, right? The first one is always, what am I grateful for? So every single day, this is the first thing I do when I get up, well, right after I make coffee, because that's one thing I'm grateful for, I start with that, 3 to 5 things or whatever it is that I'm grateful for. And some days that are going to be really profound, really big, important things. And sometimes they're going to be really tiny, seemingly inconsequential things, but it's important to look at all of it, because what you're trying to do is remind yourself that, maybe there's all kinds of horrible stuff going on in the world, in your personal life. There's all these negative things that we get so consumed by.
Mhm.
But like you said earlier, perspective, you step back and you look at that big picture, and all of a sudden there's this really long list of great things that you can be grateful for if you actually pay attention to them. And so I'm not a neuroscientist, but I know there's a bunch of research out there that has shown that there is a legitimate change in brain chemistry after focusing on things that you are grateful for. But it's you are actually changing the way your brain functions for the remainder of the day by starting that way. All right, so that's prompt number 1. Prompt number 2 is looking at the previous day, because again, I recommend doing this in the morning first thing.
Mhm.
Looking at the previous day and, what did you do well? Did you achieve the goals you set for yourself? Whatever, did you execute these things and that sort of stuff? So again, focusing on that positive first, but then also using that as a time to point out or to acknowledge, hey, I didn't quite do this the way I wanted to, or I failed at this, but never leaving it at just that negative thing, never leaving it at just a critique. Okay, you didn't do this the way you wanted to. What are you going to change? What are you going to do about that next time? How are you going to approach this differently so that you don't repeat this same error?
Mhm.
And so again, it's starting with the positive, putting the negative in there, but then taking a positive approach to changing the negative. And then the last thing is basically, I know, I guess people call it manifesting these days. I feel like I remember my mom using that word a lot when I
Sure.
was a
It's a
kid.
very yoga word.
She was a big new age kind of person, rubbing crystals and manifesting and all that stuff. But it is basically projecting what is going to happen with your life that day, long term, but who you are, right? So it's not saying I want to do this or I want to be this. It is saying I am this. This is
Yes.
what I do. This is who I am, right? So it's kind of like a rehearsal almost. It's like visualization for a sport. It's a rehearsal, and you're trying to make it as authentic as possible because you're basically trying to make your brain experience it as if it has actually happened. And so it's the same kind of thing with the journaling prompt, is that you are trying to create this possibility, right? And so like let's say journaling, it's not making anything happen, but it is creating the possibility for you to be able to achieve it, right? So, you have to believe to achieve, or, advice that rhymes is always best. It's creating that possibility in your mind to allow you to then do the practical steps to accomplish these things and to be who you want to be. And so, I've been doing that consistently every single day with very little exception for years now. And I have found it really helpful. And I've talked to so many people who have, I hate to use the phrase changed their lives, but I will because that's what they told me.
Sure.
It sounds so melodramatic, but it really does. It's this like routine that really grounds you and centers you, and it's a way to start each day the same way with that more positive mindset rather than starting the day by looking at your phone and going, "Oh my God, everything is horrible. Here's what I have to do today." You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's, first of all, thank you. I'm inspired right now to do it tomorrow. We'll see if I do it tomorrow. I'll let you know. But all jokes aside, yeah. And I really think it can be life changing, but it's not. It is like, not to have that hyperbole, not to be cliche, but I think it's so life changing because you're doing little things to change the trajectory of your day and your week
Yep.
and we can go down that rabbit
Yeah,
hole.
you're
But
taking some control of things.
yes, exactly. And that's really, that's like a total sum up of our conversation today, from the coaching that you put out to the quality and who you attract and the reading. It's like you're taking control of the things you can control. You're putting out things that are relevant to you. And I'm so happy that because that was going to be my last thing, but like perfect timing. Talked about that visualization around, like, we talked about that at camp, using that to approach heavy lifts, and you don't want to delusion yourself and be like, I can lift 50 pounds or 20 something kilos more. That's not
Yeah.
going to happen. Like, let's be realistic. But if you're at a weight that you can hit and it's within your realm, and maybe you're your own worst enemy, practicing and cultivating that, right? Like, I lift this weight, not I'm going to lift this weight, or
Yeah.
I'm doing a podcast with Greg, right? Think whatever, the things that are going to stretch you and get you to that next zone, I think is really powerful. And hearing it from somebody that's been at a real high level, I think carries tremendous value. So I know a lot of coaches and people listening to this, I hope that they take it forward, because I certainly will. And just being mindful of the time. I know we're coming up on the hour, so thank you for your time. Is there any last comments or anything you'd want to add for those listening?
I'll just add, based on what you just said, is don't ever use the words hope and wish. It's so self-defeating because they are completely passive conditions. I wish I would get better at weightlifting, or I wish I'd be better at weightlifting, or I wish I'd be better at this, whatever. That's just kind of sitting there like a lump waiting for some benevolent force of the universe to intervene on your behalf, because for some reason it has a personal investment in your
Yeah, sure.
success, right? It's just a terrible approach to anything. I mean, so, and I just don't like this idea of like just waiting around and, oh, I'm going to allow things to happen to me. Well, that's probably not going to happen. Certainly not the way you hope it does. And so you use those things where, what do you keep saying I wish happens? What do you keep saying I hope happens? Well, those are your goals, right? That's the thing you need to manifest. But now, what are the practical steps that you need to take to make that happen, right? That's how you bridge that gap from being just this really passive, inert person waiting for things to magically happen to you, to someone who is making that success possible because they're taking the practical steps to achieve it.
That's great. I would say mic drop. Boom.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Greg, thank you so much. On behalf of the team behind me, the OPEX team, helping me host this, and me personally, I sincerely appreciate your time. And I know everyone from camp is really excited that you said yes to doing this. So thank you from everyone from your week-long camp. And to Amy, I appreciate your time. And yeah, I'm excited to get this out there. And those of you listening, we appreciate you listening. And who knows, maybe we'll have another podcast in the future. And the last thing I'll say is, if you can, make your way over to Greg's camp before it sells out. It was a life-changing experience.
Thank you.